Blazing Saddles, the groundbreaking 1974 Western comedy directed by Mel Brooks, is often remembered as a daring cultural milestone, a film that not only shattered box office expectations, but also dared to test the boundaries of comedy, satire, and free expression. At its heart, it was an outrageous parody of the American Western, yet beneath the laughter and absurdity lay a series of hidden truths, near disasters, and behind-the-scenes stories that few outside the industry ever learned. The movie's enduring legacy wasn't simply the product of its outrageous jokes, but also the remarkable perseverance, risks, and creative choices made by its cast and crew, particularly Gene Wilder, whose quiet brilliance transformed both the film and the history of comedy. The story of how Blazing Saddles came to life begins with a crisis. Originally, the role of the Waco Kid, the weary alcoholic gunslinger who becomes a reluctant ally to Sheriff Bart, was not meant for Gene Wilder at all. Mel Brooks had given the part to Gig Young, a seasoned Hollywood actor with an Oscar to his name, whose weathered presence seemed perfect for an aging cowboy. Yet on the very first day of filming, disaster struck. As the cameras rolled, Young began sweating profusely and stammering, at first leading the crew to assume he was delivering an unusual interpretation of the role. But the truth soon emerged. Young was experiencing acute alcohol withdrawal. By mid-morning, he collapsed on set, unable to continue, and the entire production teetered on the brink of collapse. With no time to audition replacements and no leeway for renegotiations, Mel Brooks turned to one man he trusted above all, Gene Wilder. In a brief phone call, Brooks asked for his help. Wilder did not hesitate, did not inquire about money or script details. His response was simple and decisive. "I'll come within 24 hours. He arrived at the set. Without rehearsal, without preparation, Wilder stepped into the role of the Waco Kid and, almost effortlessly, breathed new life into character. What happened next was remarkable. Wilder not only salvaged a failing production, but elevated the film's central dynamic. He made the Waco Kid into something unexpected. A sorrowful, quiet presence in the middle of chaos, a somber shadow that made the surrounding absurdity hit harder. Wilder's sole condition for taking part was that his character would not be a clownish figure meant only for laughs. While others in the film leaned into wild exaggeration and slapstick, Wilder chose understatement. He played the Waco Kid as broken, hollowed out by years of violence, loneliness, and drink, with droopy eyes, tremors in his hands, and lines delivered with flat, weary resignation. He brought to life the portrait of a man who had once been the fastest gun in the West, but was now haunted by his past. Mel Brooks later admitted that this contrast was what anchored the movie. While Hedley Lamarr and other characters reached for outrageous parody, the Waco Kid stood as a calm eye of a storm, the stillness that allowed the surrounding madness to shine. This creative choice was a gamble. In most comedies, a subdued, gloomy character would have been overshadowed by louder personalities. But Wilder, ever precise, measured each pause, every sigh, every subtle expression. His tragic tone made the humor richer. Viewers laughed not just at the surface joke, but at the absurd juxtaposition of despair in a ridiculous world. It was this mastery of contrast that made the Waco Kid unforgettable and turned what could have been a flat archetype into one of the greatest comedic performances in film history. Wilder showed that comedy did not need a shout to be funny. Sometimes it could whisper and achieve an even deeper resonance. But even with Wilder's genius stabilizing the story, Blazing Saddles faced enormous pressure from outside forces. Warner Brothers, nervous about the film's biting racial satire and politically charged dialogue, repeatedly demanded cuts. Executives worried that its use of slurs, sexual innuendo, and open mockery of American hypocrisies would cause outrage. At times, they even threatened to halt production. Shooting days stretched to 14 hours, made worse by Brooks's perfectionism, which often required entire scenes to be res-hot after last-minute changes. Tensions ran high. In this volatile environment, Wilder once again became the quiet center of gravity. Unlike Brooks's explosive, unpredictable energy, Wilder's calmness steadied the cast. He took younger actors aside, teaching them about timing and delivery. His small gestures, an encouraging nod, a whispered suggestion, ensured that comedic lines landed with precision. Crew members described him as an emotional underground director, quietly preventing the chaos from spiraling into disaster. During this period, Wilder also planted the seed for another masterpiece. In the middle of the Blazing Saddles shoot, he casually mentioned to Brooks an idea about the grandson of Dr. Frankenstein, who wanted to escape his family's legacy. At first, Brooks dismissed it, overwhelmed by the burdens of his current project. But Wilder, patient and persistent, wrote a draft on his own. When Brooks finally read it, he realized the brilliance of the concept. From that casual remark emerged Young Frankenstein, another iconic comedy that would soon cement both Brooks and Wilder's reputations as masters of the genre. Yet before that triumph, Blazing Saddles itself nearly unraveled again. The original casting of Sheriff Bart had been intended for the legendary Richard Pryor, whose raw comedic style and fearless social commentary had already electrified audiences. Pryor even worked on the script, infusing it with his biting edge. However, due to his personal struggles with drugs and the studio's fears of scandal, executives refused to let him take the lead role. Instead, Cleveland Little was cast as Bart. Little delivered a charismatic and clever performance, but many have since wondered how Pryor's presence might have transformed the film into something even more legendary. Pryor's fingerprints remain on the script, his voice echoing through Bart's sharpest lines, making him a ghostly presence in the film's DNA despite never appearing on screen. Even with Little's capable performance, the atmosphere on set remained volatile. Not from conflict, but from uncontrollable laughter. Wilder's understated brilliance had an unexpected side effect. He cracked up the cast and crew so often that filming became impossible. His dry, perfectly timed delivery frequently sent everyone into fits of laughter that ruined takes. The problem became so severe that Mel Brooks resorted to a bizarre solution, handing out white handkerchiefs for the crew to stuff into their mouths when they felt laughter rising. If Brooks saw many handkerchiefs moving, it meant the scene was working beautifully. In one famous example, when Waco Kid reassures Bart by declaring the townsfolk the common clay of the New West you know morons, the improvised timing sent Cleveland Little and the crew into hysterics, requiring multiple takes. This strange ritual of muffled laughter became a secret rhythm of production, an odd symbol of how chaotic joy held the film together. But Wilder's contributions extended beyond acting and comic timing. He became a guardian of the script's integrity. As Warner Brothers pushed for censorship, urging Brooks to soften racial jokes, remove slurs, and reduce the sharper satire, Wilder refused to back down. Though he was neither director nor producer, his partnership with Brooks gave him influence, and he used it to protect the film's edge. He argued that sanitizing the script would destroy its purpose, reducing it to a forgettable comedy. For Wilder, Blazing Saddles was not merely entertainment, but a declaration of war against hypocrisy and racism, proof that comedy's power lay in its ability to make audiences uncomfortable. His insistence ensured that Brooks's original vision survived intact. Without his quiet defiance, the film might never become the razor-sharp satire it is remembered as today. This courage reflected Wilder's broader philosophy of comedy, that the funniest characters were often the ones carrying the most pain. He avoided exaggerated mugging or desperate grabs for laughs, preferring instead to trust the intelligence of the audience. In his Waco Kid, humor was born from truth, the trembling hand of an ex-gunslinger, the tired eyes of a man who had lived too much, the sighs of someone weary of the world. In these small details, Wilder found a deeper comedy that resonated long after the film's release. Blazing Saddles, when finally completed, became far more than a box office hit. It was a cultural earthquake. By boldly satirizing racism, politics, and American myths, it changed how comedy was perceived in Hollywood. No longer dismissed as light entertainment, satire was now understood as a powerful weapon capable of critiquing society while making people laugh. The film's willingness to push boundaries inspired later comedies from Airplane to The Simpsons and Family Guy, all of which borrowed from its chaotic, self-aware style. Brooks's willingness to break the fourth wall and collapse narrative structures paved the way for decades of meta-humor. But its legacy was not without controversy. Even today, debates rage over whether Blazing Saddles should be seen as a timeless masterpiece or as a product of its era, reflecting moral boundaries that have since shifted. Yet its impact is undeniable. It opened doors for sharper, darker comedies and made satire a central force in American culture. It also demonstrated the importance of collaboration between Brooks's wild vision and Wilder's quiet discipline, between Pryor's unseen influence and Lil's performance, between chaos and restraint. And perhaps the most astonishing legacy of all is how chance shaped history. If Gig Young had not collapsed on that first day, Wilder might never have been called. If Wilder had not whispered his idea about Frankenstein, one of cinema's greatest comedies might never have been made. If Warner Brothers had succeeded in censoring the film, its impact would have been blunted. Blazing Saddles stands as proof that masterpieces are often born not from careful planning, but from crises, improvisations, and moments of courage. Nearly 50 years later, the film endures as one of the boldest comedies ever made. Its mix of outrageous parody, biting satire, and haunting subtlety reshaped Hollywood's understanding of humor. Above all, it remains a testament to Gene Wilder's genius. Without his calm in the storm, his defense of the script, his delicate balance of tragedy and comedy, Blazing Saddles might have collapsed into chaos or faded into obscurity. Instead, it became a legend, a film that dared to break every rule and, in doing so, redefined the possibilities of laughter. What makes Blazing Saddles endlessly fascinating is not only the fact that it became one of the most successful comedies in American history, but also that, by all accounts, it should never have worked. At almost every stage, the film faced disaster. A collapsed lead actor, a studio ready to shut it down, a crew unable to contain their laughter, and a story so outrageous that it seemed destined to fail in the climate of 1970s Hollywood. Yet somehow, out of this chaos, something timeless was forged. The unlikely alchemy that created this comedy classic lies in the strange tension between recklessness and restraint, excess and minimalism, parody and sincerity. Take, for example, Wilder's Waco Kid. His performance remains the single most surprising choice in a film bursting with over-the-top caricatures. Where other actors played broad and loud, Wilder leaned inward. His voice rarely rose above a drawl. His eyes often half closed, his presence intentionally diminished. Yet it was this restraint that made him magnetic. Viewers leaned closer, waiting for every dry remark, every subtle shift in tone. And when his jokes did land, they landed with double the force. He knew that laughter is not just about noise, but about rhythm, silence, and timing. Comedy, in his hands, was as much about the pauses as the punchlines. This philosophy reflected Wilder's entire approach to acting. He once explained that the best comedic performances do not try to be funny. They are funny precisely because they are sincere. In Blazing Saddles, his Waco Kid never winked at the audience, never begged for approval. Instead, he embodied the truth of a man broken by life. And it was this truth, set against a backdrop of absurdity, that created humor far more powerful than any gag delivered with a wink and a smile. He demonstrated that even in the most outrageous comedy, depth and vulnerability matter. This is why his work still resonates decades later. Yet, Wilder was not only an actor, but also a creative catalyst. His ability to generate ideas, to see possibilities others overlooked, changed the course of comedy itself. The casual remark that led to Young Frankenstein is often told as a funny anecdote, but its deeper meaning lies in Wilder's instinct for storytelling. Where others saw only a gag, Wilder saw a premise rich with irony, heart, and satire. He recognized that the gothic horror tropes of old monster movies could be both revered and ridiculed at the same time. His draft script proved that he understood something essential about comedy, that it thrives not when it mocks from a distance, but when it loves what it mocks, treating even its most ridiculous subjects with care. Without Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein might never have existed, and without Wilder, Brooks might never have recognized his potential. The dynamics between Wilder and Brooks also highlight one of the unique paradoxes of Blazing Saddles. Brooks was a whirlwind, an unpredictable force whose energy electrified the set but also exhausted it. Wilder was a balance, the calm counterweight who gave form and coherence to Brooks's chaos. Their partnership mirrored the structure of the film itself, the noisy insanity of Hedley Lamarr balanced by the quiet sorrow of the Waco Kid. Out of this tension came brilliance. One without the other might have failed, but together they created something unforgettable. Looking at the cultural impact of Blazing Saddles, it is clear that the film broke new ground not only in what it said, but in how it said it. Its use of satire was sharper and more fearless than audiences were accustomed to. It directly confronted racism, mocked institutional hypocrisy, and skewered the cliches of Hollywood westerns. Instead of politely hinting at prejudice, it exposed it with blunt force, daring audiences to laugh at the ugliness of American history while recognizing its truth. This was not comedy as escapism. It was comedy as confrontation. For many viewers, this was shocking. For others, liberating. Either way, it made clear that laughter could be revolutionary. The film also redefined the boundaries of narrative structure by gleefully breaking the fourth wall, having characters burst off the set and into a Hollywood musical stage, then into a real-world movie theater. Brooks demolished the illusion of cinema itself. This chaos mirrored the film's deeper theme, that American myths, whether the Old West or Hollywood storytelling, were flimsy constructs ripe for ridicule. In doing so, the film anticipated decades of meta-comedy and self-referential humor that would follow, from Airplane to The Simpsons and beyond. Yet perhaps the most lasting element of its legacy is the way it changed Hollywood's perception of comedy. Before Blazing Saddles, studio executives often dismissed comedies as lightweight entertainment, pleasant diversions without artistic weight. Afterward, it became clear that comedy could be a serious cultural force, one that could challenge, provoke, and endure. Wilder's role in securing this legacy cannot be overstated. By defending the sharp edges of the script against censorship, he helped ensure that the film's bite remained intact. By embodying tragedy within comedy, he proved that humor could carry depth. By sparking Young Frankenstein, he extended this revolution into another corner of cinema. Still, the legacy of Blazing Saddles is not without its complexities. Modern audiences sometimes struggle with its language and subject matter, questioning whether it should be celebrated or condemned. But this very discomfort is a testament to its daring. Comedy, at its best, unsettles as much as it entertains, and Blazing Saddles never shied away from that. It continues to provoke debate because it was built to provoke, to push boundaries, to force its audience to confront the absurdities of prejudice and power. The behind-the-scenes stories, Gig Young's collapse, Wilder's phone call, Pryor's absence, Brooks's handkerchief solution, add layers of myth to its history. Each anecdote underscores how fragile production was, how easily it could have failed. And yet, precisely because of these crises, the film became what it was. Wilder stepping in at the last minute gave the Waco Kid the perfect balance of sorrow and humor. Pryor's ghostly influence infused the script with a sharper edge than the studio would have ever allowed if he had been on screen. The uncontrollable laughter on set proved that the comedy was alive, dangerous, and uncontainable. In the end, Blazing Saddles remains not just a film but a story about filmmaking itself, a reminder that art often emerges from chaos, that masterpieces are rarely neat, and that sometimes the most enduring legacies come from accidents, risks, and moments of refusal to compromise. Gene Wilder's role in this saga, calm, firm, quietly revolutionary, ensures that his shadow will forever stretch across the dusty plains of cinematic history, where the Waco Kid still lies on his bunk, eyes half shut, delivering the driest joke in the loudest comedy ever made.